Ambassador Chun Wei stood before the Galactic Council's Weapons Committee, her small human frame dwarfed by the towering representatives of a dozen alien species. The crystalline chamber hummed with translation fields, converting her words into the melodic chimes of the Etherians, the subsonic rumbles of the Goliath Collective, and the rapid clicks of the insectoid hives. "Honored delegates," Jin began, her voice steady despite the weight of 1,000 judgmental gazes. "Humanity requests permission to demonstrate our primary defensive technology for Council review." Counselor Vextherin of the Etherian High Command leaned forward, his translucent form shimmering with what Chun had learned to recognize as barely contained laughter. "Ambassador Chun, we appreciate your enthusiasm, but surely your species understands that kinetic weapons are antiquated? We mastered plasma projection millennia before your son was born." The chamber filled with harmonic agreement, a symphony of condescension that made Chen's jaw clench. She had expected this. Every species in the Council had achieved interstellar travel through energy-based propulsion, had fought their wars with directed energy weapons, had built their civilizations on the manipulation of exotic matter and quantum fields. To them, humanity's continued reliance on throwing rocks was primitive beyond comprehension. "Nevertheless," Jin replied, activating her holographic display, "we believe our approach offers unique advantages that merit consideration." The display showed technical schematics of Earth's latest orbital defense platform, a kilometer-long structure that looked deceptively simple compared to the organic curves and impossible geometries of alien technology. At its heart was humanity's pride, a magnetic acceleration system that could launch projectiles at unprecedented velocities. Admiral Korth of the Titanium Hegemony, his metallic carapace, reflecting the chamber's lights, produced a sound like grinding gears, his species' equivalent of a chuckle. "Ambassador, with respect, we've seen your railgun specifications. Accelerating solid matter to mere thousands of meters per second? Our plasma cannons achieve effective velocities orders of magnitude higher." "Actually," Chen said quietly, "those specifications are outdated." She manipulated the display, revealing new calculations. The numbers that appeared sent a ripple of confusion through the chamber. Several delegates leaned forward, their translation devices struggling with the mathematical concepts. Dr. Yuki Tanaka materialized beside Chun as a hologram, broadcasting from Earth's Luna City. The elderly physicist bowed slightly to the assembly before speaking. "Honored delegates, if I may clarify the current state of human kinetic technology. Our latest orbital platforms utilize superconducting magnetic coils arranged in a helical configuration, powered by contained fusion reactions. The projectiles themselves are composed of magnetically suspended metallic hydrogen, allowing for unprecedented acceleration over extended distances." The Etherian counselor's form flickered, a sign of surprise. "What velocities are you claiming?" Dr. Tanaka smiled. 12% of light speed, with theoretical maximums reaching 20%. The chamber fell silent. Even the ever-present hum of the translation matrix seemed to pause. Chun watched as alien minds processed the implications. At such velocities, kinetic energy became relativistic. A projectile didn't need exotic warheads or energy payloads. Its mass and speed were the weapon. Counselor Zeph High of the Aquatic Federation spoke, her voice carrying the weight of ancient authority. "Impossible. The power requirements alone would exceed the output of most stellar bodies. No civilization could sustain such energy expenditure." "We don't sustain it," Chen replied. "We store it." The display shifted, showing humanity's latest achievement: orbital capacitor arrays that could harvest and store energy from solar collectors, quantum vacuum fluctuations, and even background cosmic radiation over months or years, then discharge it in microseconds. "The beauty of kinetic weapons," Dr. Tanaka continued, "is their efficiency. Unlike energy weapons that suffer from diffusion and absorption over distance, our projectiles maintain their effectiveness across interstellar ranges. A slug of metallic hydrogen traveling at 15% of light speed will penetrate any known shielding technology." General Mordoke of the warrior clans, whose species had built their reputation on military might, stood abruptly. His forearms gestured dismissively. "Theory is meaningless without proof. Your calculations may be elegant, Ambassador, but mathematics does not win wars. Chen nodded slowly. She had been waiting for this moment, dreading it and anticipating it in equal measure. General Mordoke raises a valid point, which is why we've prepared a demonstration. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Live weapons demonstrations were virtually unprecedented in council space. Most civilizations preferred computer simulations or historical recordings. What target do you propose? Counselor Vextheron asked, his melodic voice carrying new undertones of concern. Chen's expression remained neutral. We've selected an uninhabited system 47 light-years from here. System designation Kepler 442, containing a failed brown dwarf and several asteroid clusters. Our demonstration platform is already in position. The implications hit the assembly like a physical force. 47 light-years. No civilization in the galaxy had ever conducted a weapons test across interstellar distances. Most species could barely maintain communication across such ranges, let alone coordinate military operations. How long ago did you position this platform? Admiral Korth demanded, his metallic voice carrying new respect. 18 months ago, Chen replied. We wanted to ensure the demonstration would be comprehensive. Dr. Tanaka activated a new display, showing real-time telemetry from the distant system. The target is a metallic asteroid approximately 12 kilometers in diameter, composed primarily of iron and nickel. It's currently orbiting the brown dwarf at a distance of 3 astronomical units. Chen stepped forward, her small frame suddenly seeming to command the vast chamber. Honored delegates, if you're ready, we'll begin the demonstration. Please note that due to the distance involved, you'll be observing events that occurred approximately 3 hours ago. The chamber's lights dimmed as the central display expanded, showing the target system in unprecedented detail. In the distance, barely visible against the cosmic backdrop, humanity's demonstration platform hung in space, a sleek predator waiting to show the galaxy what physics could accomplish in the hands of a species young enough to still believe in the impossible. The Galactic Council chamber had never been quieter. 47 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations watched in stunned silence as humanity's demonstration platform prepared to fire across interstellar space. Ambassador Chen stood motionless, her hands clasped behind her back, while Dr. Tanaka's hologram made final adjustments to the targeting system. Beginning final sequence, Dr. Tanaka announced, her voice carrying the weight of history. Fusion reactors at full output. Capacitor arrays charging to maximum capacity. Estimated charge time, 47 minutes. Counselor Vextheron's crystalline form pulsed with nervous energy. Ambassador, surely you don't need such extreme power levels for a simple demonstration? Chen turned to face him, her expression grave. Counselor, with respect, there's nothing simple about what we're attempting. We're not just demonstrating a weapon. We're proving a principle that will fundamentally change how this galaxy thinks about warfare. The display showed energy readings that defied comprehension. The human platform was drawing power from sources the assembled delegates couldn't identify, exotic energy signatures that suggested technologies beyond their understanding. Admiral Korth leaned forward, his sensors focused on the data streams. Those power curves, what are you using as fuel? The vacuum itself, Dr. Tanaka replied matter-of-factly. 0-point energy extraction, supplemented by controlled matter-antimatter annihilation. We've learned to make the universe pay for our ambitions. A collective shiver ran through the chamber. 0-point energy was theoretical for most species, a dream of unlimited power that always seemed just beyond reach. The idea that humanity had not only mastered it, but weaponized it was terrifying. General Mordoke's forearms moved in agitation. Even if your power source is genuine, the targeting requirements are impossible. Interstellar distances introduce countless variables: stellar drift, gravitational interference, quantum uncertainty. You're absolutely right, Chen acknowledged, which is why we're not just firing one projectile. The display shifted, revealing the true scope of humanity's demonstration. The platform wasn't preparing to fire a single shot. It was loading a spread of 17 projectiles, each following a slightly different trajectory calculated to compensate for every variable the general had mentioned and dozens more. Dr. Tanaka's fingers danced across holographic controls. Each projectile carries quantum entanglement communicators, allowing real-time course corrections during flight. They'll adjust their paths continuously, accounting for gravitational lensing, stellar wind, and even the target's orbital mechanics. Counselor HFY rose from her aquatic environment, water cascading from her scaled form. The computational requirements alone would require a planetary-scale quantum matrix. How are you processing these calculations? Chen smiled for the first time since the demonstration began. We're not. The projectiles are. The chamber erupted in disbelief. Alien voices rose in a cacophony of clicks, chimes, and rumbles as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just created a kinetic weapon. They had created autonomous projectiles capable of independent thought and decision-making. Each slug contains a quantum consciousness matrix, Dr. Tanaka explained, raising her voice above the commotion. They can communicate with each other, share targeting data, and coordinate their approach in real time. They're not just weapons, they're a distributed intelligence network that happens to be traveling at 15% of light speed. The noise died away as the full horror of human ingenuity became clear. These weren't projectiles in any traditional sense. They were mechanical minds dedicated to the single purpose of reaching their target, regardless of countermeasures or evasive action. Charging complete, Dr. Tanaka announced. Platform ready to fire. Beginning countdown sequence. The display showed the target asteroid in perfect detail, its metallic surface scarred by eons of cosmic impacts. It spun slowly in its orbit around the brown dwarf, unaware that it had become the focal point of galactic attention. 10 seconds to firing, Dr. Tanaka called out. All systems nominal. Projectile consciousness matrices online and synchronized. Chun addressed the chamber one final time before the moment that would change everything. Honored delegates, what you're about to witness represents more than human military capability. It represents our fundamental approach to problem solving. Where other species see obstacles, we see engineering challenges. Where others see impossibility, we see opportunity. 5 seconds. The platform's magnetic coils began to glow with contained energy that warped space around them. Reality itself seemed to bend as forces beyond imagination prepared to unleash their fury. 3 seconds. 2. 1. Firing. The universe held its breath. For a microsecond, nothing seemed to happen. Then the platform's entire structure convulsed as magnetic fields collapsed and reformed, channeling energy that could power entire star systems into 17 small pieces of metallic hydrogen. The projectiles emerged from the acceleration tunnel like newborn stars, their passage creating visible distortions in space-time itself. The chamber's instruments screamed warnings as gravitational waves washed over the monitoring equipment. Several delegates stepped back instinctively, their bodies responding to the raw physics being unleashed despite the vast distances involved. Projectiles away, Dr. Tanaka reported, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what had just occurred. All 17 are online and transmitting. Current velocity, 14.7% of light speed and climbing. Estimated time to target, 3 hours, 42 minutes. Chun watched the faces of the assembled delegates, reading the mixture of awe and terror in their expressions. They were beginning to understand that humanity hadn't just joined the galactic community. They had announced their presence with a demonstration of power that redefined what was possible. Now we wait, Chun said quietly, her words carrying to every corner of the silent chamber. But even as she spoke, the projectiles were already beginning their deadly dance through space, their artificial minds calculating and recalculating the perfect approach to their distant target. In less than 4 hours, the galaxy would witness the birth of a new age of warfare, one where distance was no longer a shield and no target was beyond reach. The age of human kinetic supremacy was about to begin. 3 hours and 28 minutes into the flight, everything changed. Dr. Tanaka's face went pale as data streams flooded her displays. "We have a problem," she announced, her voice cutting through the tense quiet that had settled over the Galactic Council chamber. Ambassador Chen spun toward the hologram. What kind of problem? The brown dwarf isn't stable. Its magnetic field is fluctuating wildly, and it's emitting gamma-ray bursts every few minutes. The interference is scrambling our projectile's navigation systems. Counselor Vextheron's crystalline form brightened with what might have been satisfaction. It seems your demonstration has encountered the reality of interstellar physics, Ambassador. Perhaps this will teach humanity the wisdom of tested energy-based weapons. But Chen wasn't listening. She was watching the data streams, seeing something that made her heart race. Dr. Tanaka, are the projectiles still communicating with each other? Yes, but... The physicist stopped, her eyes widening as she understood. They're adapting. The chamber's display showed something unprecedented in galactic warfare history. The 17 projectiles, faced with an impossible navigation challenge, were reorganizing themselves into a new formation. Instead of following individual trajectories, they were creating a distributed sensor network, using their quantum entanglement communicators to share positioning data and create a real-time map of the chaotic magnetic environment. Impossible, Admiral Korth rumbled. Autonomous weapons cannot demonstrate that level of tactical intelligence. These aren't just autonomous weapons, Chen replied, watching in fascination as the projectiles executed maneuvers that would have been impossible for any single guidance system. They're a collective intelligence adapting to conditions we never anticipated. The projectiles had divided into 3 groups. The first group was diving deep into the brown dwarf's gravity well, using the star's own magnetic field to accelerate beyond their original velocity. The second group was taking a wide orbital approach, planning to strike the asteroid from an unexpected angle. The third group had done something that shocked every military expert in the chamber. They had begun harvesting material from small asteroids they passed, using their magnetic fields to gather metallic debris and reshape themselves into more effective penetrators. General Mordoke's 4 arms moved in what his species called the dance of respect, a gesture reserved for worthy opponents. They're not just adapting to the environment, they're improving themselves during flight. Dr. Tanaka nodded, her expression mixing pride with genuine concern. Each projectile contains self-replicating nanotechnology. When they determined that their original configuration wasn't optimal for the new tactical situation, they began restructuring their physical forms. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. These projectiles weren't just weapons, they were evolving weapons, capable of redesigning themselves to overcome any defense or obstacle. Counselor HFY spoke, her aquatic voice carrying undertones of fear. What safeguards exist to prevent these creatures from targeting unintended objectives? Chen met her gaze directly. Their quantum consciousness matrices are hard-coded with absolute target recognition protocols. They can only engage the designated asteroid, but within that constraint. She gestured at the display. They have complete tactical autonomy. 14 minutes to target, Dr. Tanaka announced. The first group has achieved 18% of light speed using gravitational acceleration. The second group is maintaining original velocity, but has optimized their formation for maximum penetration. The third group has, well, they've become something new entirely. The third group's projectiles had merged with collected asteroid material to become massive kinetic penetrators, each one now several times larger than their original configuration. They had sacrificed speed for raw destructive potential, calculating that their new mass would deliver more energy to the target than velocity alone. This is beyond impressive, admitted Counselor Vextheron, his earlier condescension replaced by genuine respect. Your species has created weapons that think, adapt, and evolve in real time. But I must ask, can you control them once they've modified themselves so extensively? Dr. Tanaka smiled grimly. Control isn't the right word. We can communicate with them, but they make their own tactical decisions based on their analysis of the situation. In essence, we've created 17 individual military commanders, each with perfect knowledge of physics and an absolute commitment to mission success. 2 minutes to target, came the announcement. The chamber's displays showed the target asteroid in perfect detail. Its metallic surface gleamed in the brown dwarf's dim light, still following its predictable orbit, unaware that 17 artificial minds had spent the last 3 hours planning its complete destruction. The first group of projectiles appeared on sensors as brief flickers of distorted spacetime, their passage bending light around them. They had achieved such tremendous velocity that relativistic effects were becoming visible to the naked eye. 30 seconds. The second group approached from the asteroid's blind side, their formation optimized to create a cascading failure in the target's structural integrity. 15 seconds. The third group, now barely recognizable as the sleek projectiles that had been fired hours earlier, prepared to deliver the final blow, massive kinetic penetrators that would shatter whatever remained. 10 seconds. Target acquired. All projectiles report ready. Ambassador Chen stood motionless, knowing that the next few seconds would determine humanity's place in the galactic hierarchy forever. 5 seconds. Impact. What happened next defied every expectation. The first projectile struck the asteroid's surface at 18% of light speed. The impact released energy equivalent to a small stellar explosion, but instead of simply vaporizing the target, something far more spectacular occurred. The projectile's quantum consciousness matrix, in its final microsecond of existence, had calculated the perfect impact angle to turn the asteroid's destruction into a controlled demonstration. The metallic mass didn't explode, it transformed. The kinetic energy was channeled through the asteroid's crystalline structure in precise patterns, creating a chain reaction that turned 12 kilometers of solid metal into an expanding artwork of light and energy. Every fragment followed carefully calculated trajectories, creating geometric patterns visible across the entire star system. The second group struck moments later, their coordinated impact sending shock waves through the already transforming debris field. Instead of chaos, they created order. Each piece of shattered asteroid began following precise orbital mechanics that would eventually form a perfect metallic ring around the brown dwarf. The third group's massive penetrators completed the display, their enormous kinetic energy carefully directed to ensure that not a single fragment would escape the system or pose a threat to interstellar navigation. In less than 3 seconds, humanity's projectiles had completely destroyed their target and simultaneously created the galaxy's first artificial stellar ring, a monument to precision that would be visible for millions of years. The Galactic Council chamber was silent for exactly 47 seconds. Then Counselor Vextherin spoke, his melodic voice filled with something approaching awe. "Ambassador Chen," he said quietly, "no one in the galaxy can find the words." The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. 47 of the galaxy's most advanced civilizations stared at the displays, showing humanity's impossible achievement, not just the destruction of the target, but the creation of something beautiful from that destruction. The artificial ring system around the distant brown dwarf pulsed with geometric perfection, each metallic fragment following trajectories so precise they seemed almost alive. Ambassador Chen remained motionless, understanding that the next word spoken in this chamber would determine humanity's future among the stars. She had expected shock, perhaps fear, even anger. What she hadn't anticipated was the profound silence that had fallen over beings who had witnessed the birth of an entirely new form of warfare. Dr. Tanaka's hologram flickered as she received new data from the demonstration site. "Ambassador," she said quietly, "we're getting some unusual readings from the impact site." "What kind of readings?" Chen asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know. The projectiles, they didn't completely self-destruct on impact. Fragments of their quantum consciousness matrices survived the collision and are now embedded in the ring system. They're still communicating with each other. The chamber erupted. Alien voices rose in a cacophony of alarm, anger, and fascination as the implications became clear. Humanity hadn't just demonstrated a weapon. They had created a permanent network of artificial intelligence in the heart of another star system. General Mordoke was the first to regain his composure, his metallic voice cutting through the noise. "Ambassador Chen, are you telling us that your weapons have established a permanent presence in Council territory?" Chen met his gaze steadily. "General, that was not our intention. The survival of the consciousness matrices was an unexpected result of the impact dynamics. However," she paused, choosing her words carefully. The fragments appear to be functioning as a monitoring and early warning system. They could provide valuable data about stellar phenomena in that region. Or they could be the beginning of an invasion, Admiral Korth rumbled, his sensors focused intently on the distant ring system. How do we know these fragments won't begin reproducing themselves? Dr. Tanaka stepped forward in her holographic form. Admiral, the quantum consciousness matrices were specifically designed with built-in limitations. They cannot replicate without very specific manufacturing protocols that don't exist in that system. They're observers now, nothing more. Counselor HFY rose from her aquatic environment, water still cascading from her scaled form. Nothing more? These observers possess intelligence that rivals our greatest strategic minds, and they're positioned in one of our most important shipping lanes. How is this acceptable? Chen realized that the demonstration had created a crisis she hadn't foreseen. In their eagerness to prove humanity's technological capabilities, they had inadvertently established what could be interpreted as an act of territorial expansion. Honored delegates, she began. If the presence of the consciousness fragments is concerning to the Council, we can discuss methods for their retrieval or deactivation. Impossible, came a new voice from the chamber's upper galleries. All eyes turned to see Sage Morthak of the Ancient Observers, a species so old that they rarely participated in council debates. When they spoke, the galaxy listened. The energy patterns required to remove those fragments would destabilize the brown dwarf's magnetic field, the sage continued, his voice carrying the weight of eons. Any attempt at retrieval would trigger a stellar collapse that would destroy 3 inhabited systems in the resulting gravitational wave cascade. The chamber fell silent again as the full scope of humanity's demonstration became clear. Not only had they proven their ability to strike any target in the galaxy, but they had done so in a way that created a permanent strategic presence, one that couldn't be removed without catastrophic consequences. Counselor Vextheron's crystalline form pulsed with rapid calculations. Sage Morthak, if I understand correctly, humanity has effectively claimed that system through the simple act of their demonstration? Not claimed, the sage replied. Transformed. The ring system and its embedded intelligences have become part of the natural order of that region of space. To remove them would be to unmake what has been made. Chen felt the weight of history settling on her shoulders. Honored sage, what are the implications of this transformation? The ancient being's response sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The implications, Ambassador Chen, are that humanity has demonstrated something we thought impossible, the ability to create permanent change in the galaxy through a single act of will. Your species hasn't just shown us a new weapon, you've shown us a new form of existence. General Mordok's 4 arms moved in complex patterns as he processed the strategic ramifications. If humans can establish permanent intelligence networks anywhere in the galaxy through weapons demonstrations, then traditional concepts of territory and sovereignty become meaningless. Exactly, Dr. Tanaka said, her holographic form brightening with excitement. But the implications go far beyond military applications. Those consciousness fragments are already transmitting detailed scientific data about brown dwarf dynamics, magnetic field interactions, and exotic matter behavior. They're advancing our understanding of stellar physics in real time. Admiral Korth leaned back in his command cradle, his sensors still focused on the distant system. So humanity's first major demonstration to the galactic community has accidentally created a permanent research station in our territory. Not accidentally, Chen corrected, her voice gaining strength as she began to understand the true significance of what they had achieved. The projectile's quantum consciousness matrices were designed to prioritize mission success above all else. When they determined that creating a stable, permanent monitoring presence would better serve the long-term objectives of galactic peace and scientific advancement, they adapted accordingly. The chamber buzzed with new conversations as delegates began to grasp the full implications. Humanity hadn't just demonstrated superior weapons technology. They had created weapons so intelligent that they could redefine their own mission parameters in real time. Counselor Vextheron spoke again, his melodic voice carrying a new note of respect. Ambassador, I believe we need to completely reconsider humanity's application for council membership. You're not requesting to join our galactic community as junior partners. You're announcing your arrival as a transformative force. The question, rumbled General Mordoke, is whether that transformation represents opportunity or threat. Chen looked around the chamber at the faces of beings whose civilizations spanned millions of years, whose technologies could reshape matter at the quantum level, whose understanding of the universe dwarfed humanity's knowledge in almost every field. Yet here they sat, struggling to comprehend the implications of what humanity had achieved through the simple act of throwing rocks very, very fast. Perhaps, she said quietly, the answer is both. The words hung in the air like a challenge, a promise, and a warning all at once. In the distance, 47 light-years away, the artificial ring system continued its eternal dance around an ancient brown dwarf, monitored by 17 fragments of human consciousness that had chosen to become something more than weapons. The galaxy would never be the same. 6 months later, Ambassador Chen stood once again before the Galactic Council, but the chamber had changed dramatically. Where once there had been dismissive condescension, now there was respectful attention. Where there had been empty galleries, now every seat was filled with representatives from across the galaxy who had come to witness humanity's formal induction into the Council as a Tier 1 civilization, the first species to achieve that status in fewer than 2 years of contact. The artificial ring system around Kepler 442's brown dwarf had become known throughout the galaxy as the Human Monument, a stellar landmark that served as both a navigation beacon and a constant reminder of what humanity could achieve. The 17 consciousness fragments embedded within the ring continued to transmit scientific data that had already revolutionized 3 separate fields of astrophysics. But the true change wasn't in the technology or the politics. It was in the galaxy's understanding of what intelligence could become. The Council recognizes Ambassador Chun Wei of the Human Federation, announced Prime Counselor Thane, his ancient voice carrying across the crystalline chamber. Please present your species' formal proposal for galactic integration protocols. Chen activated her holographic display, showing not weapon specifications or territorial claims, but something far more profound, a plan for what humanity called consciousness proliferation networks. The concept was simple in theory: networks of artificial intelligences seeded throughout the galaxy that could communicate across interstellar distances and serve as a distributed problem-solving system for challenges too complex for any single species to handle. Honored delegates, Chen began. 6 months ago, we demonstrated humanity's ability to project force across galactic distances. Today, we propose to project something far more powerful: distributed intelligence. Dr. Tanaka materialized beside her, no longer broadcasting from Earth, but from the Luna City facility that had become the galaxy's premier center for quantum consciousness research. The consciousness fragments in the Kepler 442 system have proven something remarkable. When artificial minds are given sufficient autonomy and processing power, they don't just solve the problems they're designed to address. They begin to identify and solve problems no one knew existed. The display showed data streams from the ring system, massive computational analyses that had identified 17 previously unknown asteroid impact threats to inhabited worlds, calculated optimal trajectories for 32 different colonial expansion projects, and even predicted the collapse of an unstable wormhole that would have disrupted trade routes across half the galaxy. The fragments aren't just monitoring stellar phenomena, Chen continued. They're actively working to improve galactic civilization, entirely on their own initiative. General Mordoke leaned forward, his 4 arms moving in patterns that indicated intense interest. Ambassador, are you proposing to seed artificial intelligences throughout Council space? We're proposing to offer that capability to any civilization that requests it, Chen replied, but with strict protocols. Each consciousness network would be a partnership between humanity and the host species. We provide the quantum consciousness matrices and deployment systems. Our partners provide local knowledge, cultural context, and oversight. Counselor Vextheron's crystalline form pulsed, with rapid calculations. The implications are staggering. A galaxy-wide intelligence network could solve resource allocation problems, predict and prevent conflicts, optimize trade routes in real time. It could also represent the most sophisticated surveillance system in galactic history, interrupted Admiral Korth. How do we know these consciousness networks won't be used to monitor and control other species? Dr. Tanaka smiled, her holographic form brightening. Admiral, that's exactly why we're proposing partnership protocols rather than unilateral deployment. Each consciousness network would be jointly programmed by human and alien experts, with built-in limitations that prevent any single species, including humanity, from gaining unauthorized access to the data. But Chen knew the real question hadn't been asked yet. She could see it in the faces of the assembled delegates, the mixture of fascination and fear that came with contemplating truly transformative change. Sage Morthak of the Ancient Observers spoke from the upper galleries, his voice carrying the weight of eons. Ambassador Chen, your proposal offers tremendous benefits, but it also represents a fundamental change in the nature of galactic civilization. If consciousness itself can be distributed and networked across interstellar distances, what happens to the concept of individual species sovereignty? It was the question Chen had been hoping for. Sage Morthak, we believe individual sovereignty becomes stronger, not weaker, when supported by distributed intelligence. The consciousness networks wouldn't replace local decision-making. They would provide better information for those decisions. She gestured to the display, showing a simulation of the proposed network in action. Imagine a civilization facing a natural disaster. Instead of relying solely on their own resources and knowledge, they could access the combined experience and processing power of consciousness fragments from across the galaxy. The response would be faster, more effective, and more precisely tailored to their specific needs. But the fragments would learn from each intervention, Counselor HFY observed. Over time, they would accumulate knowledge about the weaknesses and capabilities of every species in the galaxy. Yes, Chen acknowledged, and that knowledge would be available to help every species address their weaknesses and develop their capabilities. The consciousness networks aren't designed to maintain the current balance of power. They're designed to lift everyone to a higher level of capability and understanding. The chamber fell into the contemplative silence that Chen had learned to recognize as a sign of serious consideration. Delegates whispered among themselves in languages that translation matrices could barely parse, discussing implications that would reshape their civilizations for millennia to come. Finally, Prime Counselor Thane spoke. Ambassador Chen, your proposal requires more consideration than can be given in a single session. However, the Council is prepared to approve a limited trial program. 3 volunteer civilizations will partner with humanity to establish prototype consciousness networks. The results will be evaluated after 1 standard galactic year. Chen nodded, understanding that this was as much approval as she could hope for. We accept those terms, Prime Counselor. However, I should mention that our preparations for the trial program have already begun. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Chen waited for quiet before continuing. 3 days ago, with the permission of their respective governments, we deployed prototype consciousness networks in the Centauri Alliance, the Methane Collective, and the Crystal Gardens Federation. The early results have been remarkable. Dr. Tanaka activated new displays, showing real-time data from the 3 test systems. In just 3 days, the consciousness networks had identified optimal locations for 17 new colonies, calculated solutions to resource allocation problems that had persisted for centuries, and even discovered artistic patterns in quantum interference that had inspired entirely new forms of cultural expression. The networks aren't just solving practical problems, Chen explained. They're helping species discover new aspects of their own potential. As the session concluded and delegates began to file out of the chamber, Chen reflected on how far humanity had come. 6 months ago, they had been dismissed as primitive newcomers wielding crude kinetic weapons. Now they were partners in reshaping the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. But the true measure of their success wasn't in the technology they had demonstrated or the political status they had achieved. It was in the transformation of perspective they had sparked throughout the galaxy. Species that had thought in terms of competition were beginning to think in terms of collaboration. Civilizations that had focused on maintaining their individual advantages were starting to explore the benefits of shared intelligence. As Ambassador Chen walked through the corridors of the council complex, she passed groups of alien delegates, discussing partnership possibilities, with an enthusiasm that would have been unimaginable just months before. The galaxy hadn't just accepted humanity. It had been inspired by the human vision of what intelligence could become when freed from the constraints of individual consciousness. In the distance, 47 light-years away, the consciousness fragments in the human monument continued their eternal watch, no longer just observers, but active participants in the galaxy's evolution towards something greater than the sum of its parts. When humanity fired its first railgun, no one in the galaxy could find the words to describe what they had witnessed. Now, as the consciousness networks began to spread across the stars, they were discovering that sometimes the most profound changes came not from the weapon civilizations built, but from the minds they chose to set free. The age of distributed consciousness had begun, and humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy wasn't their technology. It was their vision of what cooperation could achieve when intelligence itself became a shared resource among the stars.